Hello everybody and welcome to a workshop presentation for chimpanzees on getting engaged. And this is all about attention and engagement and motivation to actually do activities. My name is Cath Williams and I'm a paediatric occupational therapist and a volunteer with chimpanzees. If you ever go along to the pop-ups, you'll usually find me in the cafe taking charge of all the cakes. So I've been working with children who have neurological differences for around 28 years. It was a bit scary when I did the maths. So I've got quite a lot of extra sort of postgraduate training. I'm working with children with a variety of different sort of disabilities and other sort of abilities. And really I've got quite a sort of an interest and passion really in helping children and their families to sort of enhance quality of life and have some fun together really, and to be able to sort of participate in family life, learning activities and sort of out in the community. And I think that sort of fits quite nicely with how chimpanzees also work. So as a therapist, I've got a few sort of underpinning goals when I'm working with children with other difficulties. Maybe those living with autism or ADHD and learning disabilities. I might be sort of thinking about helping to increase their internal motivation, the way in which they're able to persist with things and getting the flow of engagement with activities. And that will help to sort of build their flexibility and imaginative thinking. And with youngsters living with sort of more physical or movement challenges, very often my work's about building some resilience and then also efficiency of the effort that they use so that they can be sort of optimally successful. And as an OT, I will typically adapt the task, adapt the environment. That might be equipment or just learning or helping other people to learn to sort of support in different ways. And then also really working on the underpinning movement issues along with my physio colleagues so that they're more efficient and more successful in what they do. So enough about me. Although actually, I had a little reflection about what makes us as adults really get engaged. You know, what is it about a task that kind of interests me? And I realised that during this lockdown period, I had decided that I would like to learn to juggle. And I've put here that it's fair to say that I'm not a natural. That continues to be the case. However, you know, I thought about my motivations and really frankly, I thought it would be quite cool. A nice, cool little skill to have. It would help me to feel that I've done something quite creative over the lockdown period. You know, I've got other friends who are baking extraordinary artisan bread and other people doing, I don't know, like extreme crochet. I thought that juggling would be quite cool. And my son, who's at university, is at home just now, and he's helping to teach me because he managed to teach himself really quite quickly. So, you know, he's the one who gives me a bit of feedback, or maybe analyse where I'm going a lot wrong, making a few suggestions, reminds me to practice, all of that. So he's involved too, which made me sort of analyse really what this is all about. So I was thinking about like the internal motivators, the thing from within in me that makes me want to do this. And I think this is quite relevant really to all of our children. So really, basically, I want to do something quite cool and it interests me. You know, something that I've always kind of wanted to do. Also, you know, I'm quite mindful of what other people think, and I'd quite like people to be impressed and think that I've done something, well, questionably worthwhile during my time down. You know, so I'm aware of other people's opinions about me. Also, actually, another thing here is that I'd like my son to know that he's done a good job in teaching me. I'd actually quite like to be able to do it so that he'll feel good about himself. So there's some theory of mind stuff going on there as well, isn't there? About sort of anticipating how other people are thinking about me and the effect that my, I suppose, my successes or my feelings and the way that, you know, I'm progressing has an impact on them. So it's that interplay. And that's quite important because it's not something that necessarily comes naturally to some of our children. And then, of course, the external motivators are the things that come in to help me with my internal motivation. So the feedback that my son gives me. Usually it's the right thing at the right time. You know, sometimes he'll take over when my internal motivation is flagging a bit, like, you know, when I'm feeling a bit rubbish at it. And he might say something encouraging and he might help me with my persistence. He'll maybe reframe me feeling a bit fed up into something quite positive, really. So, you know, the bottom line is I wouldn't really be doing any of this if I wasn't interested, or if I couldn't see the point or the purpose for me, or maybe even the purpose for somebody else. I wouldn't be doing it. And I think that's maybe a really good place to start when we're thinking about activities and persistence for our young people. So I thought maybe it might be quite useful to think about the types of attention. Now, there are many different types of attention, and then neurologically, our brains work in different ways for each of these. So let's just look at some common ones. So first over here on the left, I'm thinking about going out. I don't know, you're out for a meal or out for a drink, or just out in a busy place, and you're wanting to just zone in on what one person is saying and drown the rest of the other things out. You're filtering out all those sort of external sounds as much as you're able to. So that's using your selective attention. You're able to focus on what they're saying, what they're doing, and you're able to kind of filter out all of the other stuff unless somebody's got some juicy gossip next to you and you're trying to listen. And that would be a different kind of attention. The other one next to here is a young person doing a bit of housework. So, you know, getting on and doing the job means you've got to focus for a particular period of time, an extended period of time, to sustain your attention. So that's sustained attention. And the other comment that I usually make at this point is that with our young people, very often sustaining attention to the point at which that task is completed. And actually some of our children, because they've got difficulty with their imagination and their flexibility of thinking, and maybe even their sequencing skills, they might find it quite hard to kind of know when they've got to the end of a task. You know, what does it look like when the floor is clean? You know, why do I have to kind of move around different areas when I'm cleaning the floor? Like, what's it all about? So actually understanding the task is really important to be able to sustain your attention. I think that might be quite a useful point to think about. And then obviously cooks and other people, you know, anybody following instructions and doing something else will be alternating their attention, switching their attention from one thing to another. And I was doing that one evening just after I'd written this talk. Actually, I was trying to watch Jamie Oliver on my phone. It instructed me how to do a recipe whilst I was pulling everything together, and I had to kind of switch between the two. It's quite a good example. And then something that probably will ring true for lots of people who are attempting to work from home, do some home education, and basically keeping it together at home, is simultaneous performing activities, multitasking. And it means you're dividing your attention sometimes unequally between all sorts of different things, and that is exhausting. And then I just wanted to specifically look at hyperfocus and the ability to switch attention. And this is something that comes up quite often with children who have attention difficulties and autism. So basically, hyperfocus is a state in which a person hones in on a specific task, often at the exclusion of everything else. So they're just in this zone. There's some neurological evidence that this looks like quite calming, quite repetitive brainwaves, that it's a kind of some neurologists call it, there's an example of flow within your brain, and you're just so fully engaged. Sometimes it might be challenging activity, other times it might be quite passive and quite calming and rhythmical, but it's something that really just grabs your attention for whatever reason, and then in that phase you shut out everything else from around you. People lose track of time and so on. And so, you know, people who have ADHD and autism and other things very typically have difficulty breaking out of this hyperfocus sort of state. And at this point, the difficulty is in switching attention. So changing from one channel of attention to something else. And that transition can sometimes be quite fraught, could sometimes be quite explosive because it's been very unanticipated. And even, you know, the experience is that even with countdown type systems and things, it can be really challenging making that switch of states. And, you know, it might feel like it's a behavioural thing, but actually there's some neurology going on there that is beyond that young person or that adult's control. Screen time is a fairly sort of typical example of something that people get quite hyper-focused on, but it might be something else, some other kind of special interest. Usually it might be something that challenges you, but it's going to be something that is important to you and feels good in some way, otherwise you wouldn't get into that zone. So there's a couple of different viewpoints. There's a neuropsychologist who says, in quite a helpful kind of everyday language, there's a part of the brain, the frontal lobe, that's it here, that is underperforming, in kids with ADHD, and I would say also in autism as well. And as a consequence, their reward systems are a bit funky, he says. So they'll get into something, and that thing is so rewarding for them that it's hard for them to shift their attention to something else. And there are some neurotransmitters going on here. Dopamine in particular is a really strong reward neurotransmitter that's associated with this zone. And so, you know, that sometimes children are not able to control this state. Although interestingly, there is a more sort of behavioural type view, and another researcher and a psychologist has looked at hyperfocus from a behavioural perspective, and this is described in which the youngsters have trouble exerting control over the depth of their attention, in the same way that actually in some cases you might see they have trouble controlling and grading their physical actions. They might be really, really overbearing or just not able to kind of engage, and in the same way they might be like that with their attention as well. It's an interesting one. I think it's a significant feature for some of our children. So this little slide says, so how our children with neurological differences may view our brilliant ideas, our brilliant activity suggestions that we think, oh, it'd just be great if only we could do this really cool thing. So what might we be met with when we come up or present this activity? Well, one response is, in my house, is kind of known as the, nah, you're all right, I don't really fancy it. Actually, underpinning that, the child might be thinking, well, I don't really understand your motivation, and it isn't at all important or relevant to me. I don't really see the point. So no, it's all right, thanks. Also, there might be some stuff going on here about flexibility of thinking and how that affects the internal motivations. So the child will be sort of thinking, well, I can't imagine what this is about. I can't imagine how I might feel when I'm doing it. This isn't what I usually do. I'm actually quite anxious about how new things feel in my body, or maybe how that new thing will fit with the order of my daily activities. And so actually it's just a bit alien and feels a bit risky or a bit unknown, and actually can't really be tempted to do it. Then there's stuff around the theory of mind and coherence theories, you know, and this child, you know, might be very well bonded with you and love, you know, having you as a parent, you know, and be really very, very sort of attached with you. However, they still might not realise that this is important for you, or this is important to you. That your idea of fun, so that my child might be thinking, your idea of fun just isn't mine. I don't realise why this is important to you, or even how we can work on this together. And then the last thing, as a therapist, it's something that I often think, it's kind of therapy speak, to be talking about the just right challenge. But really it's the sweet spot with an activity, one that's not just too difficult, that's just way too hard and we're just not ready to do this. Or something that's actually just over familiar, just too easy, it's a bit menial, it's a bit repetitive, and it's just not meaning much to me either. It's not challenging me enough. So finding that sweet spot for activities is kind of crucial, but there's a place for that repetitive, familiar stuff, and maybe we'll come on to that in a bit. So I had a little think about, I've got 2 slides now. This first slide is about children with neurological autism spectrum, ADHD, some learning difficulties perhaps. And I was kind of thinking about these sort of internal feedback things. So these children who are living with these conditions will often have issues that place limits on their flexibility of thinking, their imagination, in the way in which they're able to anticipate things. They might anticipate, but in a really, really fixed and narrow way, you know, about what's familiar to them, and really struggle with any sort of differences. And they don't necessarily see the play potential in activities or even in opportunities, kind of not really knowing what to do with a swing if they've not been shown how to do it, or not really knowing what to do with a car and a man if they've not been shown what to do, for example. So their internal feedback sort of relates to, well, does it feel right? Does it look right? Does it have a familiar or effectively a safe pattern of events for me? You know, is it safe for the way it might sound or look or even feel in my mouth, whatever it is I want to do with it? Does it relate to my special interest, if I have one? And can I sustain my focus and ignore all the competing distractors from my own thoughts and from my feelings or from the world around us? And we all know children who get very caught up in actually scripting things. They might be playing through things that they've heard, scripting from a story or from a book, from a TV program or something, or they might be running through some kind of little video loop or something like that, and that's their kind of their stim perhaps, or their hyperfocus, and those thoughts can be very intrusive and actually create a barrier and a block for being able to do other activities. And it might be a place that they allow themselves to go when they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, and I've certainly seen that a lot. Children who become perhaps louder and more caught up in their repetitive stims when they're just really feeling a bit challenged by an unfamiliar activity. So I think that's something to look out for. Also, I think some of these children can be really quite disconnected with the external motivators that we put in, that are particularly those that are related to other people. You know, doing something just to make somebody else feel happy is possibly not going to be one of their motives, even though they love it when you're happy and they don't like it when you're not looking happy, but they might not know how they're able to influence that. And so really they might be quite strongly influenced by attaining something that relates to their special interests, or maybe some strong sensory feelings. So it might be about finding out what's their internal motivator and trying to get that in as an external motivator as well to reinforce things. Then the next slide is more for children perhaps who've got physical or movement challenges. And my reflection here really was that a child might be feeling that, well, my internal motivation and effort does not equate to how successful I am, what the outcome is when I have a go at something, what I really hoped would happen, or what I can see that others can do. So there's a mismatch between the effort and the intention and the output and how successful these children are. And that can lead to various different things. One might be that the child learns to actually gain some sort of satisfaction from just watching. And that's known as vicarious play, just looking on and just enjoying the moment and sharing the joy and the excitement and the success that other people are having. And for some children who are able to tell us, they report that actually that at times is sufficient for them. They might be a bit fed up actually with being rewarded for their effort and not for success. They just really like to do it rather than just get rewarded for having a go. And then I think we need to maybe think about that. The child might kind of think, well, I'm doing this again. I've done this babyish thing before, you know, give me something age appropriate. I think, you know, as a therapist, I really try to be mindful of that. And there's something called learned helplessness, which is a situation that, as a therapist, you know, is something that I'm always watching out for and try and amend. And, you know, actually, I think sometimes children who have just tried and just not been successful will come to the point where they're not happy to give it another go and will just let other people do things for them. However, just a small amount of success can give feedback that helps the child to know how to move their body the next time. And in therapy, that's something that we're working for. We're looking for the extra little bit of effort, the extra movement that was a bit more successful and a bit more efficient. And we will be looking to try and repeat that again and support it and then fade our support. And there'll be lots of repetitions that are required for that. You know, there's a bit of research going on around how many hours of practice enables an actual skill to be embedded, you know, and it's a lot. So it's not enough to just have one half-an-hour session a week. You know, these are things that need to be embedded, you know, day in, day out, really, with children. So my thought really is, a therapist, how do we entice these children who are either reluctant or finding it really challenging to engage with activities? And actually really good practice and lots of theoretical and practical approaches do suggest that we simply join them in their world for a bit and then we lead the way to something different. So taking an alongside them approach, or with them, really is going to be really important. And you know, there are various approaches. I'm thinking particularly here of intensive interaction. I'm thinking of floor time approach, very much that are kind of proper approaches. I will use bits of these as a toolkit to bring to a particular child and adjust it. And you as parents really just need to sift through and find out the tools and the things that work for you and your child. But I would say just join in. You know, if they're on the floor having a little flap, making noises or looking at something in a repetitive way, get doing. Get to see what it feels like. Get alongside them. Go and hang out with them for a bit. Wait until they notice what you're doing and give them a little grin. And keep doing it. Get the eye contact. And I think a lot of parents report that this is a great way to get eye contact. So you can, you know, and you might be that you start to comment, oh, flapping, looking, or tapping, driving. And you can just join in. And you will have the opportunity to feel what the child's feeling and thinking. And then, this is where, as a sneaky therapist, I will want to get to, because I'm usually quite sort of aware that actually, you know, families have brought me in and they don't want me to just kind of get on the floor and just start repeating what their child's doing. So we'll try and move on and expand through being a bit of a sneaky sabotager. So I might just get in their way, or I might make a few things happen in a bit of a slapstick way. Stuff will start falling over, things will crash, things will go upside down or the wrong way up, and usually it's like, oh no, silly me. No, come on, let's fix it. Let's do it like a team. Can you fix it? Let's fix it. And gradually enticing your child to actually just expand the circle of the thing that they're doing. Through a bit of fun, through some eye contact and smiles and giggles, making it all right in a calm way. Not scripted, and you might be doing this for quite some time. But you know what? Once you've expanded what they can tolerate, you can start to bring in an activity of your choice and maybe play alongside them. You can maybe wait for them to notice and then make a few little comments. And I would do something maybe like a marble run or something where you build it. There's loads of components, you build it. It makes a nice noise, it's quite visual. It's kind of repetitive. You can change how many you put down, and that changes the activity, the way it looks and sounds. And you can start making comments. Ready, steady, go. And it might be, if you're trying to get some vocalizations, that you might get a go, so the marble will drop. You might be able to do a bit of hand over hand. Anyway, you're going to be able to entice a child in to be part of this. And you know, you're also going to be the judge to know whether gentle praise or repeating a certain phrase is going to be the right thing to do, or a little, I don't know, a little back rub or something like that. But it is important that the action has a label, so that actually you're hoping in the future you can give this activity a name, marble run, balls rolling, or something like that, so that it has a label to be used in the future. So here I've got just a kind of a smattering of sort of quite familiar visual scheduling, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with some or all of these sort of approaches, and I put them up really for when we've run this where there are other parents attending. We've had a bit of a chat, you know, what's worked for you and what might be useful. So this is just a simple, this is what we're going to do today type of visual schedule. And there are some purist ways of doing this, where you take things off and put them in a finished pile, and others where you just refer to them. As a therapist, I might even just quickly sketch one out. Here's the plan, this is what we're going to do, and then I cross them off or tick them off. So you can do these fly, I believe, apps you get for your phone where you can make little schedules. So that's kind of really helpful, and we all know that this is really helpful for children who are prone to feeling quite anxious or wanting to control and just be really samey in the way that they do things. And this is really great practice, however you do it with whatever symbol set. This is just an example. Then there's the classic kind of first and then approach, and we've had some discussions around this. So this particular example, I put it quite purposefully really to have a little think, because this is first doing something, I guess, academic-y, and then doing something that might be the child's preference, which might work fine. But what you might do is you might have a 3-step thing where you might start with something that's actually quite simple and achievable. It might be like a 4-piece puzzle or something that's really easy peasy. Get the child in, engaged and comfortable and kind of in the attention zone, and then maybe introduce them slightly more challenging activity, and then the more like rewarding thing, the kind of the fun thing that, oh, once I've done this, I can do something fun. Use of sand timers, we've had lots of discussions around this with our parent groups. You know, they're very useful. I mean, obviously these days we've all got timers on our phone, that's a possibility. There's also things called a time tracker, where there might be a pyramid, or sort of more like a traffic light system that you can program the different phases, which might go red, amber and green, to allow you to sort of do a bit of a phased approach and give a bit of warning when there's a transition coming up. But it can be quite useful when you're really requiring a child to attend for a specific period of time. Yeah, do you know what? I'm going to set this to 2 minutes. We're going to do these jobs for 2 minutes. So that's it now. We'll have to wait for that and do our jobs all of that time. And keep going till it's run out, and now it's time for your favourite thing. Alternatively, you might flip that round. You might want to time limit what that little reward or that fun thing at the end is, so the child then understands that, you know, they do that as a kind of a little brain break, and then they can move on and do something else. So I think there are some approaches out there that are very well defined, and you know that you're able to sort of purchase and go on courses for all of this. I suppose I've just gathered some best examples of best practice really here, to just think about how we might be able to use them within our homes, for example, when we're playing with our children. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strip is something that I find really useful, particularly for children who are of school age and have some knowledge of numbers. They don't have to necessarily be numerate, but it just saves me having to have photos of all the activities that are in my bag, and I might put 3 or 4 activities up, and it means that I can kind of just quickly switch things around a bit if I think one thing's going to be a bit too challenging, or if I think, oh, we're on a good day today, yeah, let's get something else. I'll maybe up the demands there. So you know, that's something that is quite handy, and if a child can move on to that, useful. And then this is perhaps a different perspective, but there are parts of the systems that we've looked at there. You know, the pyramid, who are the PECS people, have a lot of these resources, and also use some of these approaches too. So things that you'll be familiar with, and I'm sure many schools and preschools have these sort of approaches. But this is about an external motivator. It links with external motivator with the child's interests, so therefore linking with their internal motivations as well. And the aim would be really for the youngsters to enjoy the sensations and routines associated with activities, so that they're less anxious about them, perhaps a bit more flexible about doing them, and that they will accept them as part of their routines, and so that they're successful. And that in turn will feed their internal rewards, their internal motivation to complete the task without necessarily needing the external reward. They'll understand the value of getting to the end of an activity and the intrinsic sort of boost that gives to you. So there's some quite nice examples here. Clearly, Mickey Mouse is a special interest for this child, and they love working on their iPad. So this child's been working for tokens. And we as the grown-ups define what it is that they have to achieve to get those tokens. There's a nice blank one. Working for this child's only working for 3 tokens. I mean, you would typically just work for 1 token. And there is a particular system, if you're familiar with PECS, they have a particular system about cashing that token in order to get their reward. So that's about communication in a 2-way. And it's quite a nice example of things that you can buy online. And this is nice and visual, because this jar, for example, would fill up quite quickly. And I think we need to know that our children need a reward. Actually, they need to be given that reward within 5 seconds. Very immediate. And lots of our children have a problem with the concept of working long term. So working even something at the end of the week, you know, would be a big deal for them. So it has to be a lot more immediate, and we need to be thinking in the very, very short term and immediate sort of feedback and reward systems for our children. So I had some practical ideas. Maybe you can, and it might be that you've already done this, but maybe you could make a list of what your child likes to do and is interested in. Are they happiest doing practical everyday tasks such as washing up? It has been known. or maybe joining in with others to do things? Or do they have special characters that they like? And you can monopolise on that. You can use those special characters to be assistants in the tasks. And it might well be that food is the way in. It might be the making of the food, even just making sandwiches or whatever. But it also might be as part of those reward systems. Maybe take some photos of you or the superhero special interest character doing the task. Maybe create a little photo sequence on your phone, or print it out and use it as a story about how to do these activities. And that might help to build some imagination and flexibility of thinking around what else the child could do with the activity. Show the child how to do the activity. Do it first yourself, and then maybe a little bit silly if that's appropriate for your child. Maybe making it eye-catching. Before really allowing them to have a go. And it's quite common for children to, I've noticed that there is a learning style with a lot of children who like to just watch and watch and watch and watch other people doing things first. And they don't really want to take the risk of things going wrong, of it going wrong. And they may perhaps watch for quite some time, and you might think that actually I don't really even know why we're even still trying to do this activity, and then suddenly they'll just pick it up and do it. I've seen it with children learning to use scissors, doing things with handwriting, doing other activities. It's been fascinating. So exposing your children to these experiences and showing them how to do things, you're still paving the way, because they may well just have that particular learning style. It might be that you need to make the activity less challenging. So as I was saying, you maybe start your little activity session with something that's just easy peasy. You know that they can do, you know that they like, but you're going to be able to move them on from it. Do something familiar first. It might be that you have to put like squidgy feely stuff, Play-Doh and other things like that, or into a Ziploc bag, so that their hands are protected. They're not going to be worried about it. They can kind of prod it and look at it and kind of engage with it in a different way before they're actually required to get it on their hands. Then there's a technique called backward chaining. Typically that's useful for learning skills like dressing, but it does apply to other things too, whereby you would do pretty much everything apart from the last step, and you then sort of back off so the child does the very last thing so that they're successful, and you gradually reduce the extra bit of help that you're giving them as they learn sort of backwards to be successful. And there'll come a point at which they will try it out and initiate and have a go themselves. So that's just something else to think about. I think really think about distractors, using a plain background. I've worked with people who have these wonderful, really bright, sparkly sort of tablecloths in the kitchen table, and actually it's just too distracting. We'll have to work on a tray or something to make it much easier to see what's actually in front of us and what we're going to focus on. It might be that you have to remove some extraneous sounds, or for some children, even just having some white noise in the background can be enough to kind of stop the unexpected sounds being too distressing or too alerting for them. And obviously we might be thinking about using ear defenders or something with some active noise cancelling in it, and there's some quite affordable sort of headphones that are around that will allow that to happen too. Also, I think a bit of a hot tip is to think about the fact that actually movement increases your alert level, obviously oxygen to your brain and your circulation system, but also it increases vocalizations. It encourages the use of sound. It might be language, but definitely you will get with movement, things like going on a swing or bouncing on a trampoline, or even just running about a bit, actually doing something active, or even thinking about doing the activity standing up rather than sitting at a table all the time. Being active really helps to sort of alert that sort of the alert systems and the vocalization systems in the brain. And so really consider doing that before then settling to do an activity. And I'd also then think about where you're doing it. I really get people working to enable their children to sit for extended periods of time at desks and tables, because that's how learning happens in school. But actually, as a therapist, I work a bit more flexibly, and there's many a time I've been found inside a play tunnel or under a weighted blanket or under the trampoline or whatever, doing a little activity, because it just feels safer. It's where the child feels kind of calm and regulated, and we've just been able to engage with jigsaw puzzles or whatever it's happened to be in those circumstances. So I think be flexible, because I think you probably can be at home. You know, and I think finding the right feedback, the right reward that you can give them, you know, giving a really big loud clap and a cheer might not be the way forward for your child. It just might be too scary. So it might be just a little clap, or it might be a back rub, or a thumbs up, or literally just really calmly going, wow, good job, you got a Mickey Mouse token, whatever it is. You know, but giving the reward that really works for your child is important. And then lastly, I suppose my parting shot really as a therapist will be to say, if there's an activity in front of them, I'm really not keen on errorless learning for children who are still learning to play and explore. So just having to do the right way of using an activity, whatever it might be, building with blocks or whatever. I actually think if that child is interested in holding them, and they're not doing their stimmy behaviour, but they're just doing something a little bit different, let them do that. Let them do that little bit of messing about and exploring, because that's play. And it's a sign that they're just learning about something a little bit more flexible that they can have control over. And as a therapist, that will be something that would thrill me. To see a child doing something new and different, even if it wasn't part of the plan, because that plan can be put on hold. We can always visit that another day. So the last slide I had were really just some discussion suggestions that we have used from time to time with our online groups, and to have a little think really. So I hope that's been helpful for you to think about what makes you tick as a grown-up. And as a parent, maybe, and perhaps there might have been a couple of little nuggets in there that would be useful for you. So thanks very much for listening.